Russian man like inside the dark, call me Bill Snatcher. Just the brother for the rapture. I hang live, holding on strong, hard to capture. Extravagant, resurrect the track and it's militant. And I react like a garden and start killing. It's manifesting. The God's work like appliances, dealing in my sleep like a lot.
What's going on, guys? So I think a lot of us would agree that when it comes to characters from part one of the characters that really stood out was the character of Temari. Like, when you look at Temari, this was a character, when she fought against Tenten, she absolutely obliterated her. When you look at what happened when she fought against Shikamaru, it was one of those fights where even though Temari had lost, somebody like Asuma still looked at Temari and said that she was a brilliant strategist. And in a series like Naruto, where it isn't always just about your power, it's also about your intellect and your ability to adapt on the fly and your deductive reasoning, a character like Temari is absolutely dangerous. This is a character who every step of the way, even though she's a housewife, she's a lot more powerful than a lot of people give her credit for, and most importantly, her skill set and just everything that makes her dangerous is worthy enough that she needs to be covered in her own video. It's something I don't see a lot of people talk about. So in today's True Power series, the Hidden Sand Village edition / the Hidden Leaf Village edition, we're going to be looking at the true power of Temari. So I think that it really stands to reason that we need to dispel this notion that a lot of people have that Temari in the Boruto era is absolutely useless, and I'm gonna say absolutely you're wrong on that, because one thing that we have to really look at is the fact that Temari, when she first got introduced in the series, like, she was able to take out Toyuya very easily. In fact, she outright beasted her, and if I'm not mistaken, in the manga, she pretty much took her out in a couple of strikes. It was a very, very quick fight. And when you get into the 5 Kage Summit, Temari was also strong enough that she was chosen to protect Gar. Now, when you fast forward over 15 years later, when you get into the Boruto era, Temari has shown, number one, that she's a genius that does not get enough credit, which is crazy because a lot of people agree Temari is absolutely big brained. However, Temari's only been a member of the Naruto clan for a little over 10 years, and yet when her son was training for the Chunin exams, she specifically stepped in to help Shikadai create a brand new variation of the shadow paralysis jutsu. Now that's really crazy because the shadow paralysis jutsu is a jutsu that is passed down throughout the Naruto clan, and you got exceptions like with Hiruzen Sarutobi, who was able to learn how to use those jutsu. And now when you look at it, Temari knows the intricacies of that jutsu enough to where she's able to look at her son and say, hey, you need to do this when using this jutsu, you need to combine it in this way. That in itself is impressive, but when it comes to her actual power, keep this in mind. Temari, we saw Temari in a very suppressed state, battling off the members of the Byakuya gang without any type of difficulty. And when it came to Urashiki, if she didn't have her son there, you can make a very strong argument that Temari would have done a lot better fighting against Urashiki if she was fully allowed to cut loose. Having your child there is a bit of a handicap. Now, another thing you have to keep in mind when it comes to Temari, we'll get into her chakra natures and everything in a second, but I really want to kind of just play up her intelligence, okay? Because when it comes to her intelligence, that's damn near what's going to be the thing that makes her so freaking deadly. I think it says a lot about a character who, during the Chunin exams at the age of like 14 or 15 years old, Temari was able to look at what Shikamaru was doing in that fight, and she was able to accurately measure the distance between herself and Shikamaru and adjust it for each time Shikamaru would try and reach out with his shadow paralysis jutsu, and every time he would make a variation, Temari would do the numbers in her head. That's pretty damn impressive. Now, the other thing is we also see how in the war arc, when Naruto tried to use the rasenshuriken, she was the first person to sense that Naruto was going to use wind style chakra. And then another thing is that she was also very well versed because she knew that Naruto was trying to use a Bijudama. So when it comes to the character Temari, there's a few things that we have to look at. So number one, she isn't one of these characters that has like 9,000 different chakra releases. That's not the case with Temari. Instead, Temari only has wind release. However, she's very, very proficient when it comes to wind release, and you have to look at it from this perspective, okay? Before Naruto showed up, Temari was the one who was openly saying that she's the strongest wind release user in the Shinobi Alliance, and nobody disputed that. Nobody disputed the level of power that she had with wind release, and I think that's really important. We've seen it where you had filler scenes where she was able to blow Konohamaru away, but we also saw back with the Toyuya fight where Temari was able to wipe out damn near the whole forest when she was fighting against Toyuya in order to save Shikamaru. So we've seen glimpses at how powerful her wind release is. But what I want to do here is I just want to kind of break down for you the jutsu arsenal that Temari has. So jumping right into it, one of the first techniques we see Temari use is the wind style sandstorm jutsu. So essentially this jutsu is Temari when she's using that giant fan of hers and she's creating a huge gust of wind that goes around and blasts the area with sand. Now in this case, by using this jutsu, what it allows Temari to do is she makes it very difficult for her opponents to get any type of a foothold. And the other thing is that the blast of wind that she's using also serves another purpose. So what Temari's able to do with this jutsu is, on top of making it very hard for you to get your footing, which is very important in a fight. That's why so many boxers put emphasis on having good footwork. But the other thing is it's also blowing this sand directly in your eyes. So not only is she taking away your footwork, but she's also temporarily blinding you. And that's really, really impressive right there, because it essentially takes away your sense of stability and it takes away your ability to see. Now that makes it really dangerous, because when Temari is able to do something like that, she can quickly follow it up. As we've seen in the anime and manga, Temari can use back-to-back jutsu very quickly. So imagine if she's already used the jutsu on you and then she turns around and she uses the wind style air current jutsu. So essentially this jutsu is created when she's able to create and control air from the palm of her hands, and Temari will also use her fan in order to do so. This jutsu is able to whip up a lot of dust in the area and it's able to create an even bigger dust storm. So the moment you get that sand out of your eyes, Temari can also use this as an opportunity to essentially blanket the whole battlefield in dust to where you're not able to actually see her, which will set her up for some of her more powerful jutsu. So for instance, look at her Cyclone Scythe jutsu. So essentially this jutsu, better known as the Wind Release Great Sickle Weasel jutsu, is when Temari uses her giant fan to create a really massive gust of wind that creates heavy air currents that go through and they shoot through the air with vacuum currents and they slash away at her opponents. Now the reason why this is so big is that we've seen it how Temari is able to go through and cut through trees and everything, but this was also the jutsu that Temari was using when she saw Sasuke with his Mangekyo Sharingan and she thought that she needed to fight Sasuke with the intention to kill. So that's pretty impressive that she's got a jutsu like that that is an even larger scale jutsu. So another thing you have to keep in mind when it comes to Temari is Temari also has the wind style sea dragon jutsu, which is basically when Temari swings her fan into the air, it creates a giant tornado that drops upon the battlefield. Now when this happens, it can also be used for a couple of different reasons. It can be used as a defensive mechanism to blow away attacks. It can also be used as a way to essentially be a bit of a diversion, to be deployed as a bit of a feint, because it gives you opportunity to delay the activation of the jutsu. The other thing is that this jutsu immediately dissipates as soon as the tornado begins, but the tornado continues in a very highly concentrated state. Once it starts hitting the target, it's hitting them with the full force of an actual tornado, and by using the fan, Temari is able to increase the amount of strength that is being used in it. Now Temari can also use the wind style raging gale wall jutsu. So essentially this wall is a bit for defensive purposes, but it really makes sense, because what this jutsu allows Temari to do is it allows Temari to create a giant wall of wind that not only blocks attacks, but it also pushes her opponents away. So this is a really good jutsu to use in battle when you're fighting against people that are throwing your kunai or they're throwing elemental jutsu at you. It gives her the opportunity to at least use the jutsu in a way to where it's pushing that stuff back. And on the other side, if she's fighting alongside somebody that's able to use fire release, it can also be incorporated in a way to where when they fire their fire release jutsu in combination with Temari's attack, it can spread that fire release jutsu amongst the battlefield. Now the wind style wind blade jutsu is basically when Temari takes her fan and she is able to create an external source of wind, or depending on how much chakra she wants to use, she can actually manipulate the air currents around her to create a whole bunch of invisible blades of wind that are able to slice through their targets. Now this is pretty impressive because, and as we've seen like in the Pain arc when this jutsu was used by one of the Anbu that was defending Konoha, this jutsu can cut through the Rinnegan summonings, and we also know it can cut through buildings, and when Temari uses it, Temari can also use it to counter other wind style attacks. And Temari also has her Cyclone Scythe jutsu, which is basically Temari when she's able to use her giant fan. Temari is able to create hundreds of small currents of wind that that collide with one another, and so when this happens, it creates a giant vacuum pocket. So the wind moves forward, it cuts through everything in its path, it deflects everything that's being hurled at her from any type of ninjutsu as well as genjutsu, as shown with Tuyuya, and it also deflects any type of weapons that's thrown at her. And the reason why this is so important is an attack like this allows Temari to attack from the distance, and given the fact that with this jutsu it's something that you can use without actually having to weave a bunch of hand signs for it, this is a jutsu you can use on the fly. That's what makes certain characters in the Naruto franchise so deadly, when they can use jutsu that doesn't require them to use hand seal. By manipulating the shape, what it's allowing Temari to do is it's allowing her to increase the intensity of the wind's cutting power, and by doing something like this also allows Temari to do things like cut through samurai armor without actually harming the samurai inside of it, because again, Temari can adjust the ferociousness of this. And so this is what's so crazy. Okay, so if we go by the anime, Temari can also use this jutsu by using hand seals, which means she doesn't have to use the jutsu using her fan. Now Temari also has a very interesting summoning jutsu. So we've all seen it where the characters bite down on their thumbs and with the hand signs, and then characters like Naruto summon these giant frogs. However, Temari has a very interesting jutsu in my opinion, because Temari's summoning jutsu plays off of Temari's strength, which is having a high aptitude for wind release. So Temari's summoning jutsu also has its own attack called the blade dance jutsu. So essentially Temari creates a giant whirlwind that's able to travel hundreds of meters in distance, and so once she swings this fan, she's already got her blood on it, so that allows her to summon that giant weasel that she has, which travels through the air, and it has its own sickle. And so when it has its sickle, it's able to travel through the air and it's able to cut through anything that it comes into contact with, just from the fact that it's able to travel hundreds of meters. But it also has a summoning creature inside of it that's armed with the weapon that can act independently. This is a jutsu that's gonna be really hard to counter, and so when we see this also allows Temari to wipe out the entire area. Now the downside to this is that if Temari gets carried away like this, then if say she's in hiding or something like that, it's going to wipe out the entire area, which means that Temari and any type of allies she has, they're gonna be exposed. However, this is one of those jutsu where we need to cause a lot of damage in a widespread manner. This is the jutsu that you use. So Temari also has a wind release castanet jutsu, which this jutsu isn't anything special. However, it is a jutsu that I do find fascinating. So with this jutsu, Temari, once she swings her giant fan, Temari is able to create thousands of sharp currents that take on the form of a net. And so when this happens, she's able to slice through her opponent. So again, this is another jutsu that allows Temari to fight from a distance, and it allows Temari to take out a large group of people when she's actually fighting. Now Temari also has the flashing fireworks jutsu. So this jutsu is something that we only saw in the Garhida novel, which I will cover at some point on this channel. This is one of those jutsus that allows Temari to essentially throw a handful of shuriken all around the area. And so once this happens, Temari then swings that giant fan of hers, and after she swings that fan, she's able to lift the shuriken into the air, she's able to make them spring into the air, and she's able to manipulate their direction. Now in closing, the last thing I would say is that even though Temari is a character like Kankuro who likes to fight from long range, don't get it twisted, Temari can hold her own in close range combat. We've only seen it in small glimpses. A good example of this would be in the filler episode that we got in Naruto Shippuden episode 234, where Temari is fighting against Konohamaru. Konohamaru is just spamming her with shadow clones, and Temari is able to not only use taijutsu to take out these clones, but she's also using wind release jutsu that would typically only be long range jutsu in a short range manner. So it shows you that she's able to adapt. So that's one of the things I really like about this character. But in closing, the thing I would definitely say is that, again, I like this character a lot, because what makes her so interesting to me is the fact that she's able to fight from a distance and she's able to adapt as she's fighting the person. Temari, much like her husband Shikamaru, is the character you keep in the background and you allow them to observe things. But unlike Shikamaru, Temari has an arsenal of jutsu that she can use to actually take down the opponent in combat. Shikamaru is one of those characters, he has to get the drop on you. So I'll be talking about Shikamaru in the future, because Shikamaru in the Boruto era has some pretty impressive strength feats that I haven't really talked about. I've mentioned some of them in passing, but Shikamaru is a lot stronger than you guys believe. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. But as always, guys, if you like anything I had to say, don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for watching on to the end. Have an awesome day, guys.